The metal handcuffs bite into Zoya's wrists with a cold, agonizing snap that echoes louder than the priest's final prayer. She is shoved forward, her knees hitting the damp, freshly turned earth beside her 7-year-old son's small casket. The mud stains her black silk dress, but she doesn't feel the cold or the dirt. She only feels the crushing weight of the officer's knee in the center of her back. Rain begins to fall, a light mist turning into a steady downpour that blurs the tears streaming down her face. Officer Miller hoists her up by the chain of the cuffs, forcing her arms into an unnatural, painful angle. He sneers, his breath smelling of stale coffee and malice as he leans into her ear. He tells her she is under arrest for armed robbery and felony assault. Zoya gasps for air, her voice a broken whisper as she begs him for just one more minute. Just 60 seconds to see the dirt cover the box that holds her heart. Miller laughs, a dry, hollow sound, and drags her away from the grave. Her heels skid through the grass, carving jagged lines in the cemetery turf. Her mother screams in the background, a high-pitched wail of pure agony, while her sister tries to intervene, only to be met with the cold barrel of a service weapon pointed at her chest. Miller doesn't care about the sanctity of the cemetery. He doesn't care about the tiny white flowers scattered over the mahogany wood. He only sees a target. He throws Zoya against the side of his patrol car, the metal thudding against her shoulder, and the world begins to spin as the blue and red lights wash the gray afternoon in a sickly, rhythmic glow. Before we dive deeper into this incredible story of vengeance and justice, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on all notifications. You do not want to miss how this unfolds. If you believe that justice should always prevail, smash that like button right now and drop a comment saying, "Justice for Zoya," down below. Your support helps us bring more of these powerful stories to life. Zoya's face is pressed against the cold, wet roof of the police cruiser. The scent of rain-soaked metal and gasoline fills her nostrils. She can hear the muffled cries of her family, but they sound miles away, drowned out by the rhythmic thumping of her own heart. Officer Miller's grip on her arm is bruising, his fingers digging into her skin like iron claws. He flips her around, forcing her to look at him. His eyes are small and dark, filled with a twisted sort of triumph. He leans in close, his badge glinting under the strobe of the emergency lights. He asks her if she thought she could get away with it, if she thought her fancy clothes and her quiet neighborhood would hide who she really is. Zoya tries to speak, but her throat is tight with grief. She managed to choke out that she has been at the hospital for 3 days, that she hasn't left her son's side until they moved him to the morgue. Miller just smirks and tells her that all her kind have the same sob story. He reaches for her purse, which has fallen into the mud, and kicks it aside. He tells her that he's been watching her, that he knows she's the one who held up the convenience store 3 blocks from the precinct. Zoya shakes her head frantically. The description the police put out was for a woman 6 inches shorter than her, but Miller doesn't care about facts. He cares about a closure rate and a deep-seated prejudice that burns in his gut like acid. He opens the back door of the cruiser and shoves her inside. The plastic seat is hard and smells of bleach and old sweat. As the door slams shut, the sound is final, like a tomb closing. The drive to the precinct is a blur of gray buildings and flashing lights. Zoya sits in the back, her forehead resting against the cool glass of the window. She watches the cemetery gates recede into the distance. She thinks about Kenji. Her husband is currently in Seoul, finalizing a massive merger that was supposed to secure their family's future. He had insisted on flying back for the funeral, but a massive storm had grounded his private jet in Tokyo. He is supposed to land in 3 hours. She wonders what he will do when he arrives at an empty grave and finds his wife in a cage. A cold shiver runs down her spine. Kenji is a man of immense patience, but he is also a man of terrifying capability. People in the city know him as a philanthropist, a man who builds schools and funds hospitals. But Zoya knows the shadow he casts. She knows the loyalty of the men who follow him. She knows that Kenji loves her with a ferocity that borders on the divine, and that hurting her is the only way to truly summon the monster he keeps hidden beneath his tailored Italian suits. Inside the car, Miller is humming a tuneless song, tapping his fingers on the steering wheel to the beat of the sirens. He glances in the rearview mirror, his eyes locking onto Zoya's. He asks her where she hid the money. He tells her that if she confesses now, he might make sure the judge is lenient. Zoya remains silent, her jaw set. She knows that anything she says will be twisted. She remembers Kenji's voice, calm and steady, telling her once that the law is a tool, and in the hands of a craftsman, it builds. In the hands of a butcher, it slaughters. Miller is a butcher. He pulls the car into the underground garage of the precinct, the screech of the tires echoing off the concrete walls. The air here is stagnant and heavy. He drags her out of the car, not even bothering to help her stand as her legs give way. He pulls her through a heavy steel door and into the processing area. The fluorescent lights overhead are flickering, casting long, jerky shadows on the walls. Other officers look up as they pass, some with indifference, others with a flicker of unease at the sight of a woman in full mourning attire being treated like a violent fugitive. Miller doesn't stop. He brings her to an interrogation room in the back, a small, windowless box with a single metal table and 2 chairs bolted to the floor. He shoves her into one of the chairs and locks her right hand to a bar on the table. He leaves her there for what feels like hours. The silence in the room is absolute, broken only by the hum of the ventilation system. Zoya stares at the table. There are scratches in the metal, names carved by desperate people who sat where she is sitting now. She closes her eyes and tries to visualize her son's face. She sees his smile, the way his eyes crinkled when he laughed at her jokes. The pain of his loss is a physical ache in her chest, a hollow void that feels like it's swallowing her whole. She starts to pray, her lips moving silently. She prays for her son's soul. She prays for her family. And then, with a dark clarity she didn't know she possessed, she prays for Kenji to arrive. The door swings open, hitting the wall with a loud bang. Miller enters, carrying a thick folder and a steaming cup of coffee. He sits across from her, moving with a deliberate slowness designed to intimidate. He spreads out several grainy photos on the table. They show a blurry figure in a hoodie holding a silver handgun. The woman in the photo is wearing a denim jacket and sneakers. Zoya is wearing a black lace veil and designer heels. Miller points at the photo and tells her it's a perfect match. Zoya finally finds her voice. She tells him he's delusional. She tells him her name is Zoya Kang, and that her husband is Kenji Kang. She sees a momentary flicker of recognition in Miller's eyes. The name Kang carries weight in this city, but he quickly replaces it with a mask of arrogance. He laughs and says he doesn't care if she's married to the Pope. In this room, he is the only god she needs to worry about. He leans forward, his face inches from hers. He tells her that he's tired of people like her coming into his city and thinking they are untouchable. He uses a slur, a word that cuts deeper than the handcuffs. He tells her that by the time he's done with her, she'll be lucky if she ever sees the sun again, let alone her mafia husband. Zoya feels a strange calm wash over her. It is the calm of the storm's eye. She looks Miller directly in the eyes, her gaze unwavering. She tells him that he has made a very big mistake. She tells him that every minute he keeps her here, the price he is going to pay goes up. She tells him that her husband doesn't believe in lawsuits or paperwork. Miller sneers and stands up, knocking his chair back. He tells her she has 10 minutes to think about a confession before he brings in the heavy hitters. He slams the door, leaving her in the dark once more. Outside the interrogation room, the precinct is starting to buzz. Word has reached the front desk that a woman was arrested at a funeral in the Heights. The desk sergeant, an older man named Henderson, looks at the arrest report and pales. He knows Miller is a loose cannon, but this is different. He sees the name Zoya Kang and feels a cold sweat break out on his neck. He remembers the gala last year where Kenji Kang donated $5 million to the Fallen Officers Fund. He remembers the way the mayor shook Kang's hand with both of his, leaning in like a servant. Henderson picks up the phone to call the captain, but before he can dial, the front glass doors of the precinct shatter inward. The sound is like a bomb going off. Shards of reinforced glass fly through the air, glittering like diamonds in the harsh lobby lights. Two massive black SUVs have backed through the entrance, their rear bumpers resting against the security desk. Silence falls over the room for a split second before the doors of the SUVs fly open. 10 men step out. They are not wearing masks. They are not carrying visible weapons. They are dressed in identical charcoal gray suits, their expressions carved from stone. They move with a military precision that freezes every officer in the room. They form a corridor, stretching from the shattered entrance all the way to the security gate. Then, he walks in. Kenji Kang steps through the wreckage of the front door. His hair is slightly damp from the rain, and his overcoat is draped perfectly over his shoulders. He doesn't look angry. He looks like a surgeon about to perform a complicated operation. He carries a sense of power that is palpable, an aura that makes the air feel heavy and hard to breathe. He walks past the stunned officers, his eyes focused on the back of the building. Sergeant Henderson finds his voice, though it's an octave higher than usual. He asks Kenji what he thinks he's doing. Kenji doesn't stop. He doesn't even look at him. He simply says, in a voice that carries to every corner of the room, that he is here for his wife. One of Kenji's men, a tall man with a jagged scar across his jaw named Minho, steps up to the sergeant's desk. He places a folder down and opens it. Inside are high-resolution satellite images, GPS logs from Zoya's car, and a sworn affidavit from the chief of medicine at the city hospital. Minho tells the sergeant that Zoya Kang was at the hospital or the funeral home for 72 consecutive hours. He tells him that Officer Miller falsified the arrest record and ignored 3 eyewitnesses who stated the suspect was a different height and race. He tells him that if Zoya is not produced in 30 seconds, the legal team behind them will begin a process that will result in the seizure of the precinct's assets and the immediate firing of every man on shift. But Kenji isn't waiting for the legal team. He is already at the heavy steel door leading to the interrogation wing. 2 officers try to block his path. They reach for their tasers. In a blur of motion, Kenji's men are on them. It isn't a fight, it's a dismantling. The officers are disarmed and pinned to the wall before they can even scream. Kenji kicks the door open. He moves, down the hallway with a terrifying purpose. He hears Miller's voice coming from behind the last door on the left. Miller is shouting, telling Zoya that her time is up. Kenji doesn't knock. He drives his heel into the lock, and the door frame splinters like matchwood. Miller spins around, his hand flying to his holster. He sees Kenji, and for the first time in his life, the bully feels true, soul-piercing fear. Kenji doesn't look at Miller. His eyes go straight to Zoya, locked to the table, her face stained with tears and mud. The sight of her in chains triggers something in Kenji that hasn't been seen in a decade. He walks over to the table. Miller screams at him to get back, his voice cracking. He draws his weapon and points it at Kenji's chest. Kenji doesn't even flinch. He reaches out and takes the barrel of the gun in his hand, tilting it away from him with a strength that makes Miller's wrist pop. Kenji looks at the officer then, and the coldness in his eyes is enough to make Miller drop to his knees. Kenji tells him that he has 2 choices. He can give him the key to the handcuffs, or Kenji can take the hand that is holding them. Miller fumbles at his belt, his fingers shaking so hard he drops the keys twice. Finally, he finds the right one. Kenji takes the keys and unlocks Zoya. The moment she is free, she collapses into his arms, sobbing into his chest. Kenji holds her, his hand cradling the back of her head, his eyes never leaving Miller. He whispers to her that she is safe now, that the dragon is here, and that the world is about to pay for every tear she shed. Kenji pulls his overcoat from his shoulders and wraps it around Zoya, the heavy wool instantly shielding her from the damp cold of her own clothes. He ignores the puddle of muddy water forming at her feet. He ignores the heavy scent of bleach that permeates the small, suffocating room. His focus is entirely on her. He wipes a smudge of dirt from her cheek with his thumb, his touch uncharacteristically gentle for a man who commands the streets of Seoul with an iron fist. Zoya clings to his lapels, her hands shaking so violently that the fabric bunches in her grip. She tries to speak, to tell him about the funeral, about the way the dirt felt as she was shoved into it, but her voice is trapped in her throat by a wall of grief. Kenji leans his forehead against hers, closing his eyes for a split second to ground himself. He tells her to breathe. He tells her that the world outside this room is already changing to reflect her pain. Behind them, Officer Miller is struggling to find his footing. He uses the edge of the metal table to pull himself up, his breathing shallow and ragged. He reaches for his radio, his fingers fumbling with the dial, but the only sound that comes through is static, deep, rhythmic static that suggests the entire precinct's communication line has been hijacked. Miller's face turns a sickly shade of gray. He looks at the door, hoping for a surge of his fellow officers to burst in and reclaim the room. But the hallway is silent. It is a heavy, unnatural silence that weighs more than the noise of a riot. He tries to muster his old bravado, the voice he uses when he's shaking down street vendors or intimidating teenagers. He tells Kenji that he is interfering with a federal investigation. He tells him that he has enough on Zoya to put her away for life, and that Kenji is just digging his own grave. Kenji doesn't turn around immediately. He continues to stroke Zoya's hair, whispering Korean endearments that are meant only for her. Then, with a slow, predatory grace, he pivots. He doesn't move fast. He doesn't need to. The sheer weight of his presence fills the room until Miller is backed against the far wall, his hands raised in a defensive posture that looks pathetic compared to the stillness of the man in front of him. Kenji asks him if he knows what happens to a man who disrupts a funeral. He asks him if he understands the spiritual cost of desecrating the mourning of a mother. Miller stammers, trying to claim he was just doing his job, that the description matched perfectly. At that moment, the door to the interrogation room is shoved open again, but this time, it isn't a soldier. It is a man in a crisp navy suit, carrying a titanium briefcase. Kenji's lead counsel, a man named Marcus, who is known for dismantling city governments before lunch. Behind him stands the police chief, a man who looks like he's aged 10 years in the last 10 minutes. The chief's eyes dart between Kenji and Miller, and the look of pure, unadulterated fury he directs at Miller is enough to make the officer's knees buckle. The chief doesn't speak to Miller first. He walks directly to Kenji and bows slightly. Not a full bow of submission, but a nod of profound respect and apology. He tells Mr. Kang that there has been a catastrophic misunderstanding. Marcus, the lawyer, doesn't wait for the pleasantries to finish. He snaps open his briefcase and begins laying out documents on the very table where Zoya was just handcuffed. He places a tablet down and hits play. The video is crystal clear. It isn't the grainy, black-and-white footage Miller tried to use as a prop. It is high-definition 4K footage from a private security camera across the street from the robbery. The woman in the video is clearly visible. She is light-skinned, wearing a denim jacket, and sports a distinct tattoo on her neck. She looks nothing like Zoya. But the video doesn't stop there. Marcus swiping the screen to a second clip. This one is from a hidden dash cam in Miller's own patrol car from earlier that morning. In the audio, Miller can be heard laughing with his partner, saying he needs a big win today to hit his quota and that he saw a fancy lady in the Heights who looked like she needed to be taken down a notch. He explicitly mentions the funeral. He explicitly mentions that he doesn't care if she did it, or not because they all look the same in the back of a cruiser. The room goes ice cold. The chief's face turns from red to a ghostly white. He looks at Miller, who is now hyperventilating, his eyes darting around the room like a trapped animal. If you are as outraged as I am by this blatant abuse of power, take a moment to hit that like button. It helps ensure that stories like Zoya's reach more people so that this kind of injustice never goes unnoticed. Don't forget to comment "Justice Served" below to show your support for Zoya and Kenji. We are just getting into the heart of this confrontation, and you won't believe the price Kenji is about to extract from this precinct. Kenji moves toward the table, his eyes never leaving the tablet screen. He watches the footage of the real criminal, then looks back at Miller. He asks the chief quite calmly what the protocol is for a kidnapping. The chief blinks, confused, and says this was an arrest. Kenji corrects him. He says that when an officer knowingly falsifies evidence, ignores a clear lack of physical similarity, and uses physical force to remove a grieving woman from a private ceremony without a valid warrant, it isn't an arrest. It is a kidnapping. He tells the chief that as of this moment, he is filing private criminal charges against Miller, not as a civilian, but as a person with the resources to fund a private prosecution team that will outspend the city's legal department for the next decade. The chief tries to de-escalate. He says they will internalize the investigation, that Miller will be suspended immediately, and that the city will offer a full public apology. Kenji laughs, and the sound is like dry leaves skittering over a tombstone. He tells the chief that an apology is what you give when you step on someone's toe. For what Miller did, an apology is an insult. Kenji turns to Marcus and tells him to execute Phase 1. Marcus nods and picks up his phone. He makes a single call, saying only one word: begin. Within seconds, the chief's own phone begins to vibrate uncontrollably. He answers it, his face contorting in shock. It's the mayor. Then it's the district attorney. Then it's the commissioner. Kenji's influence isn't just about muscle. It's about the very foundations of the city. He has spent years investing in the infrastructure, the politics, and the people. He owns the debt of the men who write the checks for the police department. Miller, realizing that his shield and his badge are no longer going to protect him, makes a desperate move. He tries to lung for the door, hoping to disappear into the chaos of the precinct. He doesn't even make it 2 steps. Min-ho, Kenji's right-hand man, is standing in the doorway like a mountain of granite. He doesn't strike Miller. He simply places a hand on his chest and pushes. The force is enough to send Miller flying back into the metal chair, which screeches across the floor. Kenji walks over to the cowering officer. He leans down, his face inches from Miller's. He tells him that he is going to make sure Miller spends every day of his upcoming prison sentence in the general population of a facility where the inmates know exactly what he did to a grieving mother. He tells him that his pension is already being frozen. He tells him that his house, which is mortgaged through a bank Kenji acquired last month, will be foreclosed on by morning. Zoya stands up, leaning on the table for support. She looks at Miller, not with the fear he tried to instill in her, but with a profound, weary pity. She asks him if it was worth it. She asks him if the few minutes of feeling powerful over a woman who was already broken by the loss of her child made him feel like a man. Miller can't answer. He is weeping now, the ugly, snotty tears of a man who realized he has poked a dragon and is about to be consumed by the flames. Zoya turns to Kenji and tells him she wants to go back. She tells him she needs to finish the burial. The anger in Kenji's eyes softens instantly as he looks at his wife. He nods and signals to his men. The exit from the precinct is even more dramatic than the entrance. The hallway is lined with officers who are standing at attention, not out of respect for Kenji, but out of a desperate fear for their own jobs. They watch as the Dragon of the East leads his wife through the lobby, her hand tucked firmly into his. The 2 black SUVs are still parked in the middle of the shattered lobby. As they reach the doors, a fleet of city black and whites arrives, but they aren't there to stop Kenji. They are there to provide an escort. The police chief follows them out, his voice cracking as he promises Kenji that justice will be swift. Kenji doesn't even look back. He helps Zoya into the back of the lead SUV, ensuring she is comfortable and covered. As the convoy pulls away from the precinct, the sirens of the escort cars blaring, the scene at the cemetery is already being prepared. Kenji's staff has arrived in his absence. The mud has been covered with wooden walkways and plush carpets. Dozens of heaters have been set up to ward off the rain. Hundreds of white lilies, Zoya's favorite, have been arranged around the grave. The priest is still there, waiting, flanked by two of Kenji's men who held umbrellas over him the entire time. The convoy sweeps through the cemetery gates, a line of power and protection that the world has never seen. Zoya looks out the window as they approach the gravesite. The rain is still falling, but it feels different now. It feels like a cleansing. She looks at Kenji, who is watching her with an intensity that promises he will never let the world hurt her again. She realizes that while they couldn't save their son from the accident, Kenji is going to make sure that the world respects his memory. He takes her hand and squeezes it. He tells her that the man who hit their son has been found in Tokyo and is already being brought back to face a real judge, not a corrupt one, but one who knows the weight of a father's grief. The car stops. The door is opened by a man in a suit, holding a massive black umbrella. Kenji steps out first, then reaches back for Zoya. They walk together toward the grave. The silence of the cemetery is heavy, but it is no longer the silence of the abandoned. It is the silence of the guarded. As they stand before the casket, Zoya feels a sense of closure beginning to take root. She knows that Miller is being processed at this very moment. She knows that the news cameras are already swarming the precinct. But here, in the rain, she is just a mother saying goodbye. The cemetery is a sea of black umbrellas and silent, watchful men as the casket finally descends. The mechanical hum of the lowering device is the only sound that competes with the rhythmic patter of the rain hitting the mahogany lid. Zoya stands at the edge of the pit, her hand trembling as she holds a single white lily. The flower is bruised and wet, much like she feels inside. Kenji stands directly behind her, his hands resting on her shoulders. His presence is a physical weight, a shield that keeps the rest of the world at bay. He doesn't look at the grave. He looks at the side of Zoya's face, watching the way her jaw tightens as she finally lets the flower fall. It strikes the wood with a soft thud that feels like a gavel coming down on her heart. She leans back into Kenji, and he catches her, his arms wrapping around her waist to hold her upright. The priest says the final words, his voice shaking slightly under the intense gaze of the men in suits who surround the perimeter. As the group begins to disperse, Zoya doesn't move. She watches the first shovel of dirt hit the casket. She remembers the way her son used to play in the dirt in their garden, his laughter ringing out like bells. Now, the dirt is taking him forever. Kenji leans down and whispers into her ear. He tells her that his work has only just begun. He tells her that every person who allowed this to happen, from the officer who pulled the trigger on the hit and run to the man who put her in handcuffs, is currently watching their world crumble. He leads her away from the grave toward the waiting SUV. The wooden walkway is firm under their feet, a stark contrast to the mud Zoya was shoved into only hours before. As they reach the car, Kenji's phone vibrates. He answers it on the first ring. It is Marcus. The lawyer's voice is sharp and professional over the speaker. He informs Kenji that the press conference is scheduled for the top of the hour. He has already leaked the body cam footage to every major news outlet in the state. The narrative isn't just about a wrongful arrest anymore. It's about a systemic failure of the precinct to vet its officers. The hashtag Justice for Zoya is already trending. Inside the SUV, the atmosphere is thick with a different kind of tension. Zoya leans her head against the leather headrest, closing her eyes. She asks Kenji if he really found the man who hit their son. Kenji nods, his expression turning into a mask of cold iron. He tells her that the driver was the son of a high-ranking city official, a young man who thought his father's position made him untouchable. He had fled to Japan, thinking the international borders would protect him. Kenji tells her that his people found him in a luxury apartment in Shinjuku. He wasn't arrested by the police. He was escorted to a private hangar. By tomorrow morning, He will be standing in front of the precinct where Miller worked, gift-wrapped for a district attorney who is currently too terrified of Kenji to show any leniency. Zoya looks at her husband, seeing the duality of the man she loves, the gentle protector and the ruthless sovereign. She doesn't ask what will happen to the boy. She only asks that he faces the truth. If you are finding this story of ultimate justice and high-stakes revenge gripping, please take a second to subscribe to the channel. We bring you the most intense stories of people standing up against corruption and winning. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a chapter of Zoya and Kenji's journey. And if you think the hit-and-run driver deserves everything that's coming to him, leave a comment with 100 emoji below. Your engagement keeps these stories alive. The convoy moves through the city, bypassing the heavy traffic as police escorts clear the way. It is an ironic sight. The very department that harassed Zoya is now acting as her personal guard. They arrive at a high-rise building downtown, the headquarters of Kenji's legal and corporate empire. The lobby is swarming with reporters, their cameras flashing like strobe lights as the SUVs pull up to the private entrance. Marcus meets them at the elevator. He hands Kenji a tablet showing a live feed of the precinct. Miller is being led out in handcuffs, his head bowed, a jacket thrown over his face to hide from the cameras. The crowd outside the station is screaming for justice. The news anchor is reporting that Miller's entire history of complaints, which had been buried for years by the union, was mysteriously emailed to the Attorney General's office an hour ago. They enter a large conference room on the 40th floor. The walls are floor-to-ceiling glass, offering a view of the city that looks like a toy set from this height. Kenji sits Zoya down in a plush chair and brings her a glass of water. He tells her to stay here with Marcus while he goes to settle the accounts. Zoya watches him walk toward the door, his gait steady and full of purpose. She knows that settling accounts means meeting with the people who think they run this city. She knows that by the end of the night, the power dynamic of the entire metropolitan area will have shifted. In a private office 3 floors down, the mayor and the police commissioner are waiting. They are both sweating, despite the high-end air conditioning. They stand as Kenji enters the room. He doesn't offer to shake their hands. He sits behind the desk, the mayor's own desk, and looks at them. He tells them that he is disappointed. He tells them that he has spent 10 years building this city, investing in its growth and ensuring its stability. He says that the incident at the cemetery was a personal insult, and a personal insult to Kenji Kang has a very specific price. The mayor starts to apologize, promising a full reform of the department. Kenji cuts him off. He says he doesn't want promises. He wants results. He slides a list across the desk. It contains the names of 12 officers, including Miller's partner and the supervisor who signed off on the false arrest report. He demands their immediate resignations and the forfeiture of their pensions. He also demands that the city donate $10 million to a new foundation Zoya is starting, a foundation for families of hit-and-run victims. The commissioner tries to protest, saying the union will never allow it. Kenji leans forward, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous growl. He tells the commissioner that the union is funded by banks that Kenji owns. He tells him that if the resignations aren't on his desk by midnight, he will call in every loan the city has. He will stop the construction on the new stadium. He will move his headquarters to Chicago and take 20,000 jobs with him. He tells them that he is not a politician. He is a man who values his wife's peace above their entire careers. The mayor looks at the list, then at the commissioner. They both nod. They know they have no choice. The dragon has spoken, and they are just sheep in his domain. Back in the conference room, Zoya is watching the news. The report shows the hit-and-run suspect being led into the precinct. The young man is crying, looking frail and terrified. Zoya feels a surge of complex emotions, anger, grief, and a strange, hollow satisfaction. She looks at Marcus and asks if this is how it always is for Kenji. Marcus smiles, a thin, sharp expression. He tells her that Kenji believes the world is a chaotic place, and the only way to find peace is to impose order on those who create the chaos. He says that Kenji doesn't see himself as a criminal or a hero. He sees himself as a stabilizer. The door opens and Kenji returns. He looks at Zoya, and the tension in his shoulders finally evaporates. He walks over and pulls her to her feet, holding her close. He tells her that it's done. The people who hurt their family are being purged. The boy who took their son will never see the outside of a cell. Miller is already being processed into a high-security facility where he will be monitored by people who answer to Kenji. Zoya buries her face in his chest, the scent of his expensive cologne and the faint smell of the rain still clinging to him. She tells him she's tired. She wants to go home. They leave the building, but this time there are no cameras. They exit through a subterranean tunnel that leads to a private garage. As they drive through the city, Zoya looks at the lights. She sees the people walking on the sidewalks, oblivious to the war that was just fought and won on their behalf. She realizes that her life will never be the same. The loss of her son is a wound that will never fully heal, but the weight of the injustice that followed has been lifted. She looks at Kenji, who is holding her hand, his thumb stroking her knuckles. She realizes that while she married a businessman, she is protected by a king. The car pulls into the long, winding driveway of their estate. The house is lit up, a beacon of warmth against the dark trees. As they step inside, the silence is profound. The house feels too big without the sound of their son's laughter, but as Kenji leads her into the living room, she sees a small memorial set up on the mantelpiece, a photo of their son, a candle, and the small toy car he loved most. Zoya realizes that Kenji's men must have done this while they were at the precinct. It is a gesture of profound respect. She sits on the sofa, and for the first time since the sirens started at the cemetery, she breathes deeply. She looks at the fire crackling in the hearth. She knows that tomorrow will be hard, and the day after that. But she also knows that she is not alone. The world knows her name now, and more importantly, the world knows who stands beside her. As we reach the conclusion of this chapter, the battle for Zoya's dignity has been won, but the healing process is only just beginning. Kenji has shown the city that his love is a force of nature, and that those who cross him will find no shelter. We have one final part of this story to tell, the trial that will seal Miller's fate, and the legacy Zoya builds from the ashes of her grief. The heavy oak doors of the Supreme Courtroom swing open with a groan that sounds like a warning. Zoya walks in, her head held high, her spine straight as a rod of steel. She is no longer wearing the mud-stained silk of the funeral. Today, she is draped in a tailored white suit that reflects the morning light pouring through the high, arched windows. White for peace. White for a new beginning. Beside her, Kenji moves like a shadow, his presence an anchored weight that keeps the room's frantic energy from touching her. The gallery is packed with journalists, activists, and city officials who are all holding their breath. They know that today isn't just a trial. It is a reckoning. Officer Miller sits at the defense table, but he is a ghost of the man he was at the precinct. His skin is sallow, his uniform replaced by a cheap, ill-fitting suit that hangs off his diminished frame. He doesn't look at Zoya as she passes. He stares at the scarred wood of the table, his hands trembling so violently he has to tuck them under his thighs. The judge, a woman known for her ironclad adherence to the law, takes the bench. The room falls into a silence so absolute you can hear the dust motes dancing in the light. The prosecutor, a man hand-picked by Marcus and vetted by Kenji's team, begins the opening statement. He doesn't just talk about the arrest. He paints a picture of a predator with a badge. He plays the audio from the patrol car again, but this time, he plays the full version. The part where Miller admits to doing this dozens of times to people he thought wouldn't fight back. The gallery erupts in a low murmur of disgust. Miller's lawyer tries to object, claiming the audio was obtained through unconventional means, but the judge overrules him with a sharp strike of her gavel. She looks at Miller with a cold, piercing gaze that tells the entire room she has already seen enough. Then, it is Zoya's turn. She walks to the witness stand, her heels clicking rhythmically on the marble floor. She takes the oath with a steady hand. The prosecutor asks her to describe the moment the siren started. Zoya looks directly at Miller. She doesn't look at the judge or the jury. She looks at the man who tried to steal her dignity at her son's grave. She describes the smell of the rain, the cold of the handcuffs, and the sound of Miller's laughter as she begged for one last look at her child's casket. Her voice doesn't crack. It is clear and resonant, filling every corner of the vast room. She tells the court that Miller didn't just arrest her. He tried to erase her humanity. She says that he banked on her being invisible, on her grief making her weak. But she tells him, and the world, that a mother's love is the strongest force on earth, and it is that love that brought him to this chair today. As she speaks, the hit-and-run suspect, the son of the city official, is brought in through a side door to testify as a state witness. His eyes are red from crying. He is the final nail in the coffin. He admits that Miller was the first officer on the scene of the accident weeks ago. He admits that his father paid Miller $50,000 to lose the initial report and find a scapegoat. The room gasps. This wasn't just a racist arrest. It was a deep, multi-layered conspiracy to protect the wealthy by sacrificing the innocent. The official in the gallery, the boy's father, tries to stand and leave, but two of Kenji's men are already standing at the exit, their arms crossed, their expressions immovable. There is no escape today. Miller finally snaps. He jumps to his feet, shouting that he was just a soldier in a war no one else wanted to fight. He screams that the city is a jungle, and he was the only one keeping the animals at bay. The judge doesn't even use the gavel. She simply signals to the bailiffs. They tackle Miller to the floor, the sound of his head hitting the carpet muffled but final. They drag him out of the room, his screams echoing down the hall until they are silenced by a heavy door. The jury doesn't even need an hour. They return a verdict of guilty on all counts: kidnapping, civil rights violations, perjury, and conspiracy to obstruct justice. The sentencing is immediate. The judge gives Miller the maximum, 25 years without the possibility of parole. She gives the hit-and-run driver 15. She gives the corrupt official 10. As the sentences are read, Zoya feels a strange sensation in her chest. It isn't joy. It is a quiet, profound sense of space. The void left by her son is still there, but the thorns of anger and injustice that had filled it are being pulled out one by one. Outside the courthouse, the sun is blinding. A massive crowd has gathered, holding signs with Zoya's face on them. When she appears at the top of the steps, the roar of the crowd is deafening. They aren't just cheering for her. They are cheering for the idea that someone finally stood up to the giants and won. Kenji stands a step behind her, letting her have the moment. He looks out at the city he helped shape, and for the first time, he doesn't look like a man at war. He looks like a man who has finally found a reason to build something that lasts. Zoya steps to the microphone. She doesn't talk about revenge. She announces the launch of the Leo Kang Foundation, named after her son. She says that the $10 million settlement from the city will be used to provide legal aid to families who have been victims of police misconduct and to fund a private task force to investigate cold cases of hit-and-runs. She says that her son's name will not be remembered for the tragedy that took him, but for the justice that followed him. If this story of absolute justice and the power of a mother's love moved you, please make sure to subscribe to our channel. Stories like this remind us that no matter how dark the world gets, the light will always find a way if we are brave enough to fight for it. Like this video to honor Leo's memory and share it with someone who needs to know that they are not alone. Comment "The Dragon and the Lily" below to show you watched until the very end. Your support is everything to us. The final scene takes place a week later. The sun is setting over the cemetery, casting long golden shadows across the grass. The grave is no longer a place of mud and chaos. It is covered in a beautiful white marble monument featuring a statue of a small boy holding a toy car. Zoya and Kenji sit on a stone bench nearby. There are no SUVs, no men in suits, no sirens. Just a man and his wife. Zoya leans her head on Kenji's shoulder. She tells him that she had a dream about Leo last night. She says he was laughing and he told her he wasn't cold anymore. Kenji kisses the top of her head. He tells her that as long as he draws breath, no one will ever make her feel cold again. He tells her that the city is different now. The police department is being overhauled, the mayor has resigned, and the streets feel a little lighter. Zoya looks at the marble statue. She realizes that while the world tried to bury her, they didn't know she was a seed. And with Kenji as the sun, she has grown into something the world will never be able to pull up by the roots. They sit in silence as the first stars appear. Two people who lost everything and gained the strength to change the world. Justice wasn't just served, it was settled. And for the first time in a long time, Zoya Kang is finally at peace. Thank you for watching this epic journey of love, power, and justice. We hope this story inspired you to stand tall in the face of adversity. Don't forget to check out our other videos on the screen now for more incredible stories of vengeance and victory. We will see you in the next one.